All right, and welcome to the April 29th version of the Lifeboat Academy Coordination Circle. We are the crew today as Ronnie is unavailable, doing good work to protect the world. And as is our custom, we start by doing a land acknowledgement by bringing the land in and bringing the land to the center. And if anyone wants to offer up a land acknowledgement, please do so now, and otherwise I will take it on. Taking it on. All right. So we start by acknowledging the land as a reminder to ourselves that the land, rightly understood, is how we are connected to all of our relations, to each other, to the sources of our sustenance and health, to the process of life and living things. And so we start with that acknowledgement as a way of starting off in a good place, in the right place, as we do our work together, as a reminder that what we do here today ultimately needs to be in service of the land, and striving towards figuring out what it means to be in right relations with all of our relations. And where that means healing harms that have happened, where it means making new connections, where it means renewing old connections, where it means sometimes letting go of things that don't serve us anymore, and habits that may be harmful. And in doing so, we acknowledge a debt of gratitude to the indigenous peoples of the world who have learned through experience that this is the only sustainable way of being, and who are willing to share that with us at a time when we desperately need it. So we simultaneously acknowledge a deep debt of gratitude and the responsibilities that come with that. And in particular, I will acknowledge the WSÁNEĆ, who are I am currently residing on, living on, working on the unceded traditional territories of the WSÁNEĆ and other Coast Salish peoples, and who are still here, who are still our neighbors, who are still fighting the good fight of being in the world in right relations. And so may we all strive to be good relations to each other and to everyone around us. So yeah, and I think just let's take a minute to anchor that in for ourselves. And so I invite you just to close your eyes, feel yourself, feel the weight of your body on the seat. In your mind's eye, locate yourself in the landscape where you are. See yourself in the room where you sit. See the room in the landscape. Cast your attention to the north and the east and the south and the west, noticing all the relations and landmarks in those directions, and feeling yourself firmly in the center of that landscape. And take a deep breath in, drawing in refreshing, energizing air, knowing that the air is the mixture that combines us, that connects us all. And as you exhale, release anything that keeps you from being present, from showing up, anything that no longer serves. Letting it return to the earth, knowing the earth will return it regenerated and energized and ready for your use again. And when you're ready, find your way back to the circle by opening your eyes. All right. So I'm going to keep it really simple today. Our check-in question is, what's on your mind? what are you up for talking about today? And the circle, as I see it, is April, Roland, and me. And you always have the opportunity to pass. And so, April, what's on your mind today?
Um, Thinking about coordination and how important that is. And just wanted to sort of get a reading on how we're doing with that today. Over to Roland.
Yeah, same. And wondering also about coordination and as a form of weekly huddle to, yeah, sort of getting a sense of how things connect and what needs to happen from a more sort of global view. Over to you, Ben.
Well, yeah, I have similar and in that same spirit, looking actually at the schedule again. We have it on the agenda to look at the calendar, but we're switching the finance meeting on Fridays. And so looking at how that works in terms of sort of the distribution of meetings from one week to the next and what's the best use of our time. And actually, do we need weekly coordination circles? I know we've talked about this before, but kind of revisiting that question, what's the best use of our time? And in particular, I was wondering if it made sense to substitute a hive mind for a coordination circle, sort of alternating. They're very similar, and it would just be anyhow, it's just an idea to put out there. All right, so we move on to revisiting our North Star. Why are we here? Why does it matter? Why are we bothering with all this nonsense in the first place? And I think, again, just in the spirit of kind of keeping today loosey-goosey, let's do twice around. We each get a chance to share what is our version of the North Star. Why are we here? Why bother? Whatever that means to you. We'll do once around to share and then once around to respond and reflect. So, April, over to you. What is your version of our North Star?
I believe that we're here to develop the Lifeboat Academy and the way of working that we believe is regenerative and restorative, and that we are working through a living experiment in bringing guilds to life and their connections to each other, I guess. Understanding their connections to each other. And on to Roland.
Living life as an experiment and engaging in the Lifeboat Academy as a research project to improve, well, I can't think of words right now. Sustainability isn't quite the right word, but that regeneration and increasing the quality of life within a sustainable footprint and reducing suffering in the world and learning to live in greater harmony with the natural world by reestablishing our place amongst our relations. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the research project angle, and I think um, it's all process. Building the lifeboat is the lifeboat. And part of that building is that process of weaving together, creating a shared understanding. And the difficulty of doing that, it's the where the research project and the halfway house for modernity come together. Because I think living life as an experiment and reanimating the world there's something about moving from nouns to verbs, and I think of that as inhabiting a living world is inhabiting a world that is always changing, never static. And I think of the heart work and philosophy side of things, how do you communicate a worldview that is different to people who don't share that worldview? And that's part of the research project is not just the practicalities of quality of life and a sustainable footprint, but it's actually bringing people on board with the idea of an experiment. So yeah, how do we bring people on board? And that's building the bridge as we cross the chasm, because we're all kind of figuring that out. So we've all had a chance to share, and once more through just to see what does that bring up for you? What are you noticing? What stands out? What does that make you think about? Over to you, April.
For me, that brings out wanting to know more about the research project.
Can you say any more about that?
No, except that I've heard it referred to a number of times in our meetings, but I don't know what it means.
Mm.
I don't know, is there a research project that it is possible to be part of? Are we the research project? Are we proposing that we be a research project? And to whom are we making that proposal and why? How would it be different to be a research project than what it is that we do now and how we are now? And over to Roland.
I think I may have gotten sidetracked. What's the focus of this round again?
Reactions, thoughts, reflection on what we've shared so far.
Uh-huh. I think I'm again wondering about how do we talk about things, and where do we talk about them? I'm actually a little surprised that with April, that you said that you want to know more about the research project. I think it may be that we're just transposing the words of an experiment, Lifeboat Academy being a living experiment, to research project. I don't, and it may just be clarifying that, because I feel like this is something that we've been talking about for a long time now. So I guess I am curious about that. And I think I'm kind of stuck there. So I'll pass over to Ben.
Yeah, I kind of have, well, and I think this is, it kind of brings up this question of how do we talk about it? How do we share the information? Because in some sense, it may be the research project is the forest. We talk a lot about the trees. And so the sum total of all the trees that we talk about is the research project. I don't know if that is helping at all, but the idea, the Roland, from the very beginning, for many years now, we have been working on the question of how do we maximize quality of life within a sustainable footprint? This actually preceded the idea of the Lifeboat Academy. And in fact, the lifeboat became the expression of that, if we talk about what does it mean to maximize quality of life within a sustainable footprint, the two obvious first questions are, what do we mean by quality of life? And what do we mean by a sustainable footprint? So the sustainable footprint was answered in terms of the fair share footprint, which is why everything that we do is based on the 16 fair share footprints that the property represents. And then the question of a whole diet and the material well-being that we can provide becomes the physical representation of living within a sustainable footprint. And then the resilience and regeneration at the person, place, at community level starts to answer the question of what does quality of life mean? A little bit. It's simultaneously how do we do it and what are we doing, if that makes any sense. But then the experiment is how do we, if we're living life as an experiment, or if the Lifeboat Academy is an ongoing experiment, what is it an experiment in? It's an experiment in how well can we live within a sustainable footprint in a real material way. So then, and the conversations, like the 6 conversations and what does building a lifeboat mean to you, has been from the very start a way of getting people to talk about what does quality of life mean to you. It becomes a surrogate for that conversation. And so the research project, and the other part to this too is the transition economics, which is my working hypothesis. When we talk about, we started talking in one of the guilds about the theories of change. And my working hypothesis is if we give people free access to their fair share of resources and a structure for collaboration, they will maximize quality of life within it. So if we can collaborate effectively, if we can self-manage and self-regulate and collaborate with free, uncoercive access to the natural resources that are, our birthright, then that's how we will maximize quality of life. So that's, I think, the short version of what the research project means to me. And it's actually one of the questions I've been thinking about a lot the last couple of days is how much do we want to be explicit about treating it like a research project, having a proposal. We already have all of the information basically that goes into that proposal. It's really a matter of kind of packaging it up that way. So I'm going to keep going around though, just to see, does that help April with the idea of the research project, and where is there still kind of a gap?
That does help, because I thought there was a whole research project thing that I missed somehow.
No, it's the whole thing is the research project.
Okay, so
The
it's
whole
not
10-year experiment is the
right.
research project.
So somehow I had an idea that there might be some group out there, or some university, or some initiative, or some organization that had thought that maybe you would like, or we all would like to change what we're doing into a specific research project for for their needs and our needs. So and I thought, how come I haven't heard more about that? Because it doesn't exist. It exists in a different sense than I was.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the way that we've been. It's also, I guess, coming from the finance and legal side of it, is one of the ways that I want to propose what people are financing is a 10-year research experiment. right?
Okay.
So that's actually, and we may, in some future date, it would be wonderful to engage universities or other centers of learning, ways of learning in that research project. But it's, it's meant to be the ultimate in citizen science.
Right. Okay. And it might be useful to talk about it in those terms sometimes.
Yeah.
It's apt to attract people like me. Now, it might just further confuse other people that we are hoping to notice that these opportunities are here. On to Roland.
I feel like I'm pulling us away from the direction we're supposed to take. We have also talked about the treating it as an experiment or a research project, as a tool for that can be used in different ways. Like there's the tracking of results, and setting parameters for the experiments, and so on. And for me, that brings up the question of how to organize that, and which guilds, or is there a guild that coordinates it, or is it per guild, or so I have been thinking about it in those terms, in terms of like a research project, and yeah. Anyway, um, so I will pass over to Ben.
Mhm. Yeah, and I do feel like this kind of pulls us away from the coordination in some sense. It also, I think, provides a tool for coordination. And the guilds, if when you think about how research projects are organized, it's actually just like we're doing. Oftentimes there will be multiple labs involved in a research initiative. People will be taking apart the core concept, and some will be focusing on the biometrics, and some will be focusing on the sociographics, and some will be, so and that's exactly what we're doing, is taking those different aspects and handing them to the guilds. And the guilds are not independent, the guilds are interdependent, and take their direction from the stewardship council, which is the research council that says that has the job of managing, of herding the cats, right? And so and I think that is, when we're talking about coordination, again, it's always this balance between, we want to create room for innovation, autonomy, agency, but we want to create a container that channels that innovation and agency so that it moves in a similar direction, that it's propelling us. So, and I think that that's also partly that worldview thing, is getting away from the idea of it's never completely analytical. We can take it apart. Well, it is an oscillating process of analytics and synthesis. So we take some things apart and say, you can focus on this one thing. And there's some people who only want to focus on that little area, and they can go into detail in that little area. But then there's the duty of pulling that back and weaving it together for the synthetic part of it, so that, and some corrective where that's wandering too far away from the mainstream of where we're trying to go. So that's another way in which the research project can provide, the guardrails on, keeping everything more or less aligned, and allowing for the spontaneity and, you know, um, yeah, the innovation at that level. I think the main challenge in all of this is simply the volume of the material that we are trying to hold. And by saying, this is we're creating a culture, right? So that means everything from the ground up. How do we grow food? How do we organize our economics? How do we how do we deal with difference? How do we deal with breaches to the trust? So we're kind of reinventing an economic, judicial, incentive and and logistical system. And so yeah, it can feel like a lot. And if we try to simplify it, we oversimplify it. We have to oversimplify it to allow people to get their hands around it. And then we have to kind of rip away that simple model and say, yes, but that's not quite it. So it's kind of like this. Do you get it? Okay, but it's not that. And we've got to figure out that balance point of being able to sort of provide people enough comfort, enough structure that they feel like they can get their hands around it without allowing them to reify it and and have it oscillate ossify. So anyhow, what an interesting conversation to have. And moving from the North Star to where are we, what are we actually trying to do? So we take that big research project, how can we maximize quality of life within a sustainable footprint? And we break it out into some components, saying the farm is our demonstration site where we try to put those principles into practice. And our guilds then take on different aspects of it. So the heart work and philosophy is really looking at the level of meaning. The philosophy part, it really is about what's our epistemology, what's our understanding of how this all works and why we're doing it, what are the values. Principles and governance are focusing on the procedural aspects. How do we work together? Finance and legal is looking at that, the connection point between us and the larger society. So how do we make sure that we have a clear legal right to do this and are navigating in the current economic system? Farm, food, and housing is looking at the pragmatics of what happens on the ground, literally. How do we feed and house and clothe ourselves? And then outreach is looking at how do we maintain those webs of connections with other projects. And I think if you wanted to expand, you could think of the research project as a multimodal research project or multi-site research project where every lifeboat is another mini experiment in that research project. And so part of outreach is identifying locations that want to be part of that larger research project and then harmonizing the experiments that are going on so that, again, allowing for agency and innovation, but trying to figure out how we can harmonize the learning altogether. And this year, what we're hoping to do, the number one is establishing our legal right to this property, securing the land. That was reaffirmed again at the last finance meeting. So how do we raise the money and establish the legal entity? How do we pull people who are interested or curious about this into the project so that everyone is as much as possible on the same page, which is proving to be more and more challenging the more we do it. And being able to then again, from the research project perspective, we want to be able to measure change over time. So where do we start and how do we start gathering those baseline measures? So that is kind of the view of how we're trying to put the research project into practice. So given that, questions, thoughts, reactions, comments, over to you, April.
I'm starting to get real interested in the interdependencies amongst these entities. And one thing I was wondering was, do they consider the North Star questions in their meetings and their operations? And is that something, I mean, that's kind of like an overarching thing for all the guilds. And is there some way of sharing, if they do, pay attention to those questions. Is there some way of sharing their take on that with us, I guess? That's all I'm thinking. Over to Roland.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've been thinking that, you know, this is all still relatively new, and we're still in the place of things sort of shaking into place, because this is the coordination circle is essentially the caretakers. So we are the representatives of all of the guilds, and currently we are sort of establishing the format of the meetings. So it's becomes our responsibility, prerogative to you know, if to bring things up like the North Star. So, and this would be the forum. I would think that this is the forum where the caretakers talk about this kind of thing. You know, do we want to harmonize the way that the meetings take place? Are there certain elements that the caretakers would like to implement that would be consistent in all of the meetings, or, you know, like how much do so that there's certain elements that we want to be consistent, but that otherwise it's up to the individual caretaker and guild members to form the way that their meetings take place. So this seems like the place where we answer those questions. So over to Ben.
Yeah, um my first thought, April, as you were talking, is no they. There's no they. There's no them. There's only us. And what Roland was saying, and I think that for me, this is also celebrate success, right? That one of the questions that you had earlier, I know, was about where do emerging trends come up? Where do higher level issues come up? Here they are. And I think that the idea, I think, kind of one of the hypotheses is if we have a standing structure, as long as we have the space for this to happen, it will come up as it needs to. So, and like, we don't need to force the question when we have the coordination circle. And the question is, how well coordinated are we? And we go through the process of what's our North Star, look at what we're identifying. Well, maybe this is about the time we should bring this back, each of us being caretakers in the guilds. Maybe this is the time we bring this back and say, hey, you know, we had this really interesting conversation at the coordination circle. I'm wondering what all of us think about, you know, we talk about the North Star at the coordination circle. Should we talk about that here? And again, allowing, like Roland's saying, it doesn't have to, I don't know that we need to force it in a certain way. We can just allow those, this is what's coming up at the coordination circle. This might be really useful. And I imagine at certain points, you know, it's also navigating via the tensions.
Yeah.
You know, so this is also an opportunity of unearthing where there might be tensions, and then working with the highest tension first, you know, like working with there's a Lojong, work with the greatest defilement first. So it's like where there is the thing that seems to be keeping us from making progress that presents itself, that's what we focus on. So yeah, I think this is kind of a way of saying the system works. And I have a written note. I'm not sure where it goes in the meeting notes about kind of sending back to the coordination circles, or sending back to the guilds this question of North Star. All right, so let's look at the calendar, and like I said, I do have a question. I don't know that we need to answer it today, but it's just something that's on my radar. So as of this week, we are switching, get rid of my under there. As of this week, we are switching the Finance and Legal Guild meeting. So that was last Friday, and now it's this Friday, and every 2 weeks following, because the alternating Friday works better for people in the guild. So that means this week we have outreach and network tomorrow, principles on Thursday, and finance on Friday. And we have a navigation session as well. And then next week, we have hive mind time and heart work and philosophy. But it's we haven't really been using hive mind time that much. So we now have kind of a heavy week and a light week. And that may not be a bad thing. And there's also the mentorship meeting next week and the navigation meeting this week. And those go alternating. So I guess first of all, is there anything else that that should get on the calendar that anyone has to add? Well, then let's just go around, I guess, sort of in the spirit of gathering considerations. I'm not making it as a formal proposal, but I was thinking about if we convert one of the coordination circles to hive mind. And I guess to get the ball rolling, I do feel a little concerned that we haven't managed a single hive mind since we've switched to the guilds. And that might just be because we're kind of meetinged out because we've got the guilds working. We also seem to be doing okay without doing the hive mind. I don't think we've really had anything major fall through the cracks. Everything's kind of been humming along. So anyhow, that's just thoughts on, should we just live with this schedule where we kind of have a heavier week and a lighter week? So this week we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings. And then next week we would in theory have 3 meetings, but one's the hive mind, so kind of really 2 meetings. Thoughts? Over to you, April.
In terms of hive mind, are we collecting sort of lists of things, or do we have a hopper
We have
for
a
hive
hopper.
mind to flip stuff into?
Yep.
And do we have a big long running list of things that are in there?
Yeah, it's not that long, and the last I checked, it was fairly minor, most of the things that were in there. We can actually, I'll stop share and
Yeah, if you go over to, are you going to Asana to show?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because then that's also showing people where it is.
yeah. So I have to stop share and reshare when I switch these things. So this is the current list. I don't think I can. Basically, a lot of these are some of them are quite minor, they're quite limited. Some of them I think we've actually answered, like how do we protect privacy around YouTube? I think we mostly have done that in making it clear that anyone can block anything. So far, it hasn't been an issue. We did have actually one video that we decided not to publish because we decided it wasn't really, it was more of a private video, the things that got discussed. And so, yeah, I think if you look back, it would be nice to get some of these tidied up, to actually kind of go through and say, have we dealt with this? But from my perspective, nothing isn't getting worked out. Anyhow, I guess I'm breaking circle. So just to answer your question, yes, we have an onload, we have a hopper, and things can get added as needed to the hopper. So back to you, April.
So are we still on the question about, do we need hive mind or coordination meetings, or?
Generally, it's we're looking at the schedule. Do we want to alter the schedule as it is, or do we want to just keep living with the schedule as it is right now?
Well, if everything's going along and no big roadblocks and no big traffic jams, then I'd say just keep on keeping on. Over to Roland.
So, in terms of the busyness of the weeks for reoccurring items, I can't remember when the outreach and networking guild were talking about having the lifeboat circles. I think that was an evening somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it was still uncertain. It hasn't been established if it's going to be once a week or once every 2 weeks yet. Is that correct? That's
We've
recollection.
gotten feedback, but we haven't made the decision, and it's kind of split. Nobody has an absolute one way or the other, and yeah.
Okay, because so that would be something to take into consideration in terms of busyness. I know I've made I've made the argument before, and I still feel it makes sense that coordination circles every 2 weeks, because then each guild will have had an opportunity to meet. And I like the idea of using the same time slot that the coordination circle would be vacating every other week for something. And I'm wondering about, would there be like a navigation session specific for guild members? A little bit like sort of. So I was thinking of Pamela's suggestion of a campfire, and not specifically a campfire, but that we already have several types of circles that could be really useful to you to that we could use this time slot to focus on something. Yeah, like big questions that we're inviting everyone to participate in. And that could be something actually we could tap the Hard Work and Philosophy Guild to sort of like organize that, like, what types, a list of types of questions or something like that. So I think that there's value that I would like to explore the possibility of using those empty time slots for something. And talking big picture, getting people together to talk big picture beyond the 6 conversations could be an interesting invitation, not as a and have it in as a kind of I'm thinking of it as kind of a drop-in, not a everybody has to get together and figure this out kind of thing. So those are just sort of like riffing on what's coming up for me. Over to Ben.
Yeah, I think, and I'm hearing both of you, and I'm feeling like it's kind of split the difference of there may be some changes coming up, but we don't have the 6 conversations scheduled yet, and we don't know how that's another piece to kind of fit in there. It seems like going to every 2-week coordination circles might make sense. And then, so vacating the space makes sense, and, kind of using the alternative time. And what will it be like if we have the 6 conversations? Because that sounds like what you're suggesting, actually, in terms of the sort of the big questions. So I'm kind of feeling like it's good to feel into this, and maybe we don't need to take any action yet. Well, keep on keeping on until sort of the dust settles. Especially because I think if we were going to eliminate one of the coordination circles, it would be this one. Because this is the heavier week. So we would probably want to keep on with next week at least, as the, to sort of shake out the yeah. And actually we may want to change the time because I think that this may not be the best time. It seemed like it was working for people, but now it's seems to be a lot of conflict for people. The Friday or the Monday afternoon. All right. So I'm going to make a proposal just to formalize it, that we don't take any action at this point.
No.
And thumbs up on, we'll keep on with how we have it, but I will try to I'll write notes. We're kind of coming up to the end of time, so I don't want to worry about it now, but I'll take notes about what we just talked about. And coming back, we haven't, well, and you know what, here it is. We're at time, and we haven't really done the guild reports. And actually, given that we have most of our guilds are meeting this week, I'm not sure. Sorry, just trying to play with my screens here. So Heart Work and Philosophy meets tomorrow, right? Or no, outreach meets tomorrow. Finance meets again. We met with the lawyers. That meeting went really well. And there's not really a lot to report, because we gave them what we're looking for, and we're waiting for their kind of first pass on what they recommend. And Farm, Food, and Housing met, and we need to meet again. And it really was a very exploratory. I don't know, Roland, if you want to say anything about that quickly.
Yeah, I'm the caretaker for that, so I can speak to it. We did do some concrete stuff. There were some requests from neighbors about the property that we dealt with, and then the rest of it was pretty exploratory in terms of a farmer caretaker questions and issues. So it was useful. That is very vague. I'm still working out my feeling with privacy and all of that. So I think that pretty much covers it, though. Back to you, Ben.
Yeah, cool. And we will be meeting again. And so yeah, principles in governance, finance, farm, and outreach are all this week. I guess Heart Work, do you want to do an update on Heart Work
Sure.
as well?
Well, like Ben was pointing out, that artwork did not meet last week. Is that right?
It met last week.
We did
Met
meet
last
last
Yeah,
week,
we met last week.
Oh, okay. Maybe you should do it, April, because apparently I'm not really good at it.
What I remember is that we talked again about the progress on the 6 conversations, and the co-creating of that opportunity with the outreach guild, and that was successful. And there is a survey out as to particular timings now for everybody that might be involved with that. So until we hear back on that, we can't move really. And then the other thing that we really talked about was the process around coming together to get to some action points, and how that process for everybody at times is frustrating. And does that mean that we shouldn't be doing the process, or what does that mean? And had a really good discussion about trying to do this kind of work, particularly in the guilds now. And everybody got to talk about their feelings over time, I think, with the process, where at times it feels like nothing is happening, except something always is happening. And one of the things that was happening in the times we thought nothing was happening was people got to explore that whole feeling a lot more, and to pick out commonalities in trying to do this kind of work, I believe. That's it. That's April's top of the head report.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is we created the subcircle for the 6 conversations.
Right.
And
Right.
and that is convening. So we need to convene the 6 circle conversation group.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that covers that, and we can do an abbreviated. I feel like we have covered what we need to cover in terms of coordination. I feel that way, but let's just do a quick check. Are there any other things that we need to, this is from last week, anything else that we need to discuss from around coordination?
I don't, sorry, me?
Sorry. It's a weird circle. You're next.
Yeah, over to you, April.
I don't think there's anything else. I am curious as to where everybody else that was interested in this time is, and is it a scheduling problem for people, or is it that people have not developed interest in being part of this? That's it for me.
I just wanted to add uh, one of my tasks with the Outreach Guild is to the YouTube video stuff, and I've started to learn how to do the chapters. And in the Farm Guild meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, we talked a little bit about how to have the welcoming and the opening, the grounding at the beginning more compressed. So I am adding that detail in the chapters for the YouTube video for the Farm Guild meeting. And I'll be sending out a message encouraging people to have a look at it, to think about it, and so that that we address it. So back to Ben. And I want to say I am thoroughly impressed by Ben's note-taking. I've been following along, and that being one of my great challenges, I'm amazed and impressed at how good they are.
Why, thank you.
Looking for extra points.
Yeah. Well, and
And
in that spirit of we're at time, I know April's got commitments, and I think that this has been a really useful conversation, and I'm trying to capture some of I think some of these topics can come up again next week, and be sort of carried along a little bit. So I am feeling whole and complete, and thumbs up. All right. I think any last thoughts for the good of the cause? Hearing
no
none,
thoughts.
off we go. All right.
Thanks. See
Bye.
you soon.
See you all
Bye.
soon. Bye-bye.